Kingdom Under Fire 2, a game that many people worldwide can be forgiven for immediately being very excited about back in 2014 and then completely losing track of up until now as it went a little bit quiet. Well, my friends, that which once was thought lost to time and the ever-changing world of the MMO marketplace is in fact still alive, and in fact, would you believe that this game is actually out tomorrow, the 14th of November, where it actually releases on PC exclusively in German, English and French languages. I was very fortunate personally to have been chosen by Gameforge and Blueside to directly attend a special pre-launch event for the game 1 week ago in Germany. We had an incredible all-inclusive chance to party, explore the beautiful castle Reichenstein and ultimately get an hour or so to play the game before anyone else in the world in its most stable build, of which you are seeing in today's footage. Firstly then, the question many of my Final Fantasy XIV followers may have on the tip of their tongues is, what exactly is Kingdom Under Fire 2? Well, Kingdom Under Fire 2 is a buy-to-play MMO RTS. You can back the game with 3 Founders Packs right now, with only cosmetic differences between them. But once you buy the game, that's you owning it for life. There's no subscription model, and I actually got personal confirmation in my very own little question during a Q&A event that there will be no buying of any semblance of power whatsoever via real money. So now you know that the marketing is fairly solid and is a decent foundation there. The game, as I say, is an MMO RTS. So how this works is the next thing you might ask, because it's not something you usually think of with those two very separate parts of the genre. Well, like any other MMORPG you play, like Final Fantasy XIV or many of the others in the market like World of Warcraft, you have a solo character. You can spend forever in character creation and make this hero character your own with all sorts of sliders and wonderful different features that you can just slide to make it horribly ugly or incredibly beautiful depending on what you want to play. And ultimately, once you've created your hero, you can then go about the in-game world doing MMO-y things, such as kill quests, collect quests, the usual fare, including things like getting a mount, which I believe you get at level 4, which I was very happy with personally. But that really isn't what impressed me. Any game can really do that MMORPG combat, and it works here like it does in many other games. What I wanted to show you specifically that blew my mind personally was the Rts Combat, and the switch in between of that. So a little way into the sort of tutorial areas, let's call them, the first few hours of the game, you gain access to an instant storyline area. This will basically be a massive battlefield where monsters will spawn for the storyline purposes, and you have to take control of an army of your own to do combat against them. There's archers in the rear, infantry up close, and then you pretty much in the middle. You could switch between your third-person MMO gameplay with your hero character by pressing the tab key, or the tilde key will actually zoom you all the way back out to your troop mode. So it's actually seamless, and after a while you get used to switching in and out to deploy your new troop orders, or press keybinds to make them do special moves, such as turning on flaming arrows to rain down from the sky at the enemy at one moment, and then tabbing back to your character to deliver brute justice in the weaker part of your flank. There are 5 different classes then that you can choose from, with a 6th actually teased during the press event called the Dark Sorcerer, which is all kinds of awesome, and I wish I had footage for you, but they didn't have any at the actual event. Apparently it's going to be like a black magic specialist with destructive long-range spells, but for the most part, and in fact all of my footage, was actually of an Elementalist, which I chose because it actually had a pet summon. So in terms of the 5 classes you can start with, you get the Gunslinger, which switches between a sword and 2 pistols. It has combos and is quite fast-paced. The Spell Sword is basically your mage with a sword and scepter. That again is quite fast-paced and looks quite visceral in motion. The Berserker is your Dynasty Warriors playstyle, where you're smashing things to pieces with a large 2-handed sword in melee. The Ranger is your atypical bow user, that you have to aim each of the arrows and abilities. and the Elementalist, which is a mage basically with short and long range cast spells with a pet, which was my personal favourite. Of course, I would actually go for this. I mean, come on, it's a giant magical bear, and bears are fierce and mighty. Also, the cute female character here is absolutely adorable. At this point, I should probably mention that this game has gender-locked classes, which to some people might be a problem, but honestly, it's something that I was sort of fine with overall. And I'm sure it's something they could work on in the future if they wanted to, as the developers are clearly wanting to develop lots of new stuff for this game, including the first thing being that Dark Sorcerer, which of course is a female, but I'm sure people will want a wizard sort of character in the future, so it's not set in stone, but as it is gender locked, and there is a variety of different classes, but if you wanted a female berserker, you're going to have a bad time. It's actually a very addictive game once you get into the RTS side of it. The switching back and forth might have immediately concerned me before actually getting to play it. I thought it might get a little stale or repetitive to switch back and forth all the time, but the best way I can describe this game is kind of like a mix of Dynasty Warriors Combat mixed in a big bowl with MMORPGs, you know, generic ones, and then Total War games blended together, and it really works quite nicely in those areas. The downside I had with this game personally, believe it or not, were actually the solo PvE MMORPG stuff, which usually I enjoy the most, like killing boars and stuff like that. I felt that once you got to command such a mighty army, but it was slightly jarring to go back to a, you know, sort of solo player experience fighting 10 bears for pelts and stuff like that. Conversely, I found myself alone to some degree with that assessment. Quite a few of the other journalists and influencers I talked to personally at the event were the other way around completely. So I guess in many ways that actually illustrates that it's quite a bit of different gameplay for both types of player, but an okay mix of the two together, and that's really where this game's selling point fits on that marketplace. Some players might excel in one part of the game than the other, I suppose, and that's actually going to make tactics during PvP and the planned raid content with other players' armies all the more exciting to get involved in, because every fight should in theory be quite different. The troops themselves that you get to control, once past these tutorial maps that I got to play personally, I'm actually told turn into large-scale PvE events, and you can pretty much recruit your own soldiers to fill 3 army slots. You can put any troop type in any of these 3 slots, but 3 seems to be your absolute maximum. The default then would be 2 infantry probably and an archer slot, but from what I've seen personally, there are so many different unit types in this sort of troop compendium they have in game that you could be busy trying them all out for quite a long time into the game, and obviously they're adding more to it. It's kind of like their go-to part for updates is to add new troops, which is really quite cool if you think about it. And as much as I harp on about the troop deployment sort of RTS side of this, there is a fully fledged MMORPG in the background here. We do have like character customization, gear, weapons through quests, and a crafting system in the game I told about. There's a fully fledged upgrade system for that, and indeed for your troops as well, with a regrade system, sort of re-rolling stats for both your armor and your troops' armor and troops' weapons and your own weapons. And of course we also have different skills that we could put on our bars here. I'm fairly early level in this footage, so you only see like 3 abilities on my bars, but obviously there's like what, 20 something bars there, and obviously there are other action bars we can put on here, and I believe there's like a talent tree system as well. So there's a lot of depth to your character build, your troop deployment, the type of deployment you have, and of course there's lots of stuff to do at endgame, and I believe there's going to be lockouts per day on some content. I believe that's the 4-player content, and there's also going to be all the way up to a 16-player raid, which if you can imagine 16 players and their 3 troop deployments, so their armies individually, that's a lot of stuff on screen at the same time. And I would like to say that's probably the reason that some of the texture models look a little bit outdated. You know, even though I'm playing this on Ultra in this footage, it may look a little bit grainy here and there. There's a lack of sort of anti-aliasing. I would imagine that this is a direct design choice because of the amount of stuff that's on screen at any one point in the RTS mode, and switching between RTS and that third-person MMORPG perspective is obviously quite demanding. So it's quite a demanding, quite interesting, ambitious game for sure. So in a typical fight, they say you mix and match based on what they call the rock, paper, scissors system, where one deployment may have strengths over another and vice versa, with very limited times that you can switch these in and out on the actual field. So you actually have to think tactically and resourcefully for not only the type of troop that you're deploying onto the field, but also the terrain and any other obstacles or benefits the field might actually provide you, all the while managing your hero character when you can to push the tide in your favor down a weaker part of your flank, or a section where the enemy is attacking when you don't have as much defense. The concept of this game honestly surprised me. That was the biggest part of this that really shocked me and made me want to go, wow, this is something a little bit different. And as much as the build we got to play was stable, we were told this was not the final representation of this game. Indeed, this footage is not the final release version. There's plenty of localization and bug fixes that have happened apparently since this version we got to try out, so hopefully, fingers crossed, it will be even more smooth than the footage I got to capture here. The concept then of an RTS MMORPG is something that I don't think anyone else has approached before on this market, and Kingdom Under Fire 2 is really aiming to be that sort of overlap, but I have to applaud them for the sheer, push to get this out in the West. This is something that people have wanted over here. It's, it was fairly popular in other territories. There is a Russian version of this game and indeed a Korean version, but they pretty much flopped for the most part. But this is a completely sort of redesigned, version of this game. There's $80 million apparently invested, it says in our press documents. It would be a terrible shame for this not to see light in our Western territories, and I'm so glad that they got to do that. I'm personally a lover of the traditional MMORPG, and I think this game actually converted my expectations, and whilst it's not going to directly replace any of the games I dedicate my playtime to, such as Final Fantasy XIV, it will certainly be a nice side game, and that's why I personally love the buy-to-play model. I don't personally feel obligated to play it all the time, and I can enjoy it whenever I want, with no pressure. The gameplay alone is more than enough reason to pick this one up, I feel, and that launch is amazingly the 14th of November, which is tomorrow, so I'm looking forward to getting in the game and seeing the differences between what we have in this footage and what we have in the final game. If you want to check this page out and purchase the game, that will be linked in the description as usual, where you too can buy a pack if you so desire. I think the base one is like £20, £24, something like that, so it's not all that expensive for an experience that's probably going to give you upwards of 300 hours, even if you just did, the basic game and didn't really involve yourself much in the end game. So, it's a win for me personally. That's fairly decent value for money, I believe. Either way, once again, massive thanks to Gameforge for sending me out to Frankfurt and getting to explore the world of Berger in Kingdom Under Fire 2. It was truly an experience unlike anything else, and I would love to do it again sometime. And the game is really quite fun. It's one of those games that you look at and you go, that's not necessarily the most visually appealing thing on the market, considering the original age of its conception and its original release in Korea being all those years ago. But it's one of those games that sort of surpasses that sort of graphical need in your mind. Once you get access to that RTS mode, it kind of makes you feel happy that this exists, and to have an opportunity like this to play an MMO RTS, I personally will be trying to put some time into this as well. But anyway, thank you all kindly for watching. Hopefully my first impressions were interesting enough to you. I probably have quite a few other videos to share with you on this, and until then, I'll see you all next time.